These are not fun things to talk about. They are horrible things about humanity. Nobody wants to deal with it. And we can't move forward together as a society if we do not acknowledge that these things are happening.
So why don't we acknowledge them? Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm not sure how well this video is going to do because of the subject matter. It might be suppressed by YouTube, who knows. But these things need to be talked about, and because of a lot of the liberal policies that have been permeating our society, these things are allowed to happen. Now, the first story that I want to talk about is an update from a story from over a month ago. Now, you may have already seen her videos from over a month ago, her explaining her attack, but there's been some updates, and if you are unfamiliar with this whole story, here's a quick recap.
Okay, so this story of how someone tried to murder me in Vancouver.
Stephanie's story starts just after midnight on April 15th. Visiting from Toronto, she was walking through Stanley Park when she heard a man's voice.
He just ran at me to attack me.
Reliving the moment on TikTok a week later.
It just felt like he was a predator and I was prey.
Now screaming, fighting off the assailant, she ran, but he caught up.
Just slammed me into the ground. The only way I can describe him was being like gleeful. Like he was taking great joy in hurting me.
She called police and ran again. The suspect was right behind her.
I was kicking the fucking shit out of him, like kicking his chest, kicking his face, screaming. He was yelling at me like, shut up, you stupid bitch.
Already injured and bleeding, the chase continued.
He really started wailing specifically on my head. My vision just went blank and I just thought like, oh my God, I'm gonna die.
After catching up to her a fourth time, Stephanie managed to escape again, running on this path towards the Westin Bayshore Hotel, where she caught the attention of plainclothes officers. The suspect was arrested shortly after.
He did actually break my nose. You know, my hands, my legs were all bloody.
A man in his 30s, Peter Hans Nungu, has been charged with one count of assault causing bodily harm. He appeared in court Wednesday afternoon and was released with the following conditions: 24-hour house arrest, a psychiatric assessment and treatment program, no drugs, alcohol, or weapons, and he must have no contact with the victim. Just 2 days before, Nungu was charged in Surrey with assaulting a police officer and uttering threats.
I have to commend her courage, her composure, her resilience, her tenacity, not only to fight through what she went through, being attacked by a complete stranger, but then to tell her story.
Now, you would think after seeing that report, seeing her video, hearing that the police had already had him arrested for a previous attack on an officer, that this would be a very cut and dry situation. But we have an update to the story, and he's been released under house arrest. And this article goes on to make it sound like we don't even actually know if it's the guy when all the evidence has been proven that it is the guy. As you see here, suspect in assault on tourist Vancouver seawall, released from secure medical facility. He is now living under house arrest. And this is something that Pierre was campaigning about, people who cause these violent attacks, that they shouldn't enjoy house arrest.
Laws that release the most violent repeat offenders again and again on early bail, parole, probation, and house arrest. These numbers should alarm all Canadians. Unfortunately, over the last 10 years, the Canadian government has failed to take them seriously. The new Conservative government will reverse the catch and release laws of the Liberal government. The early bail, the house arrest.
But it seems like more and more of these policies are benefiting the attackers and not so much the victims. Now, the wording in this article could be because of legal reasons, because he hasn't actually gone to court. But I do find it weird that they say Vancouver police say a man who is accused of assaulting a woman. And then they also write, it is alleged that on April 15th, he randomly attacked a tourist from Toronto, but then states Nungu was arrested close to the scene and was charged with assault. Even in the Global News video that we just saw, it was stated that there was plainclothes officers who arrested him when she ran towards them. So I don't know why everything is accused or alleged when we have the evidence here. He was also already on bail, which doesn't make any sense that he's not arrested and locked up. Nungu had been released on bail from the Surrey court for allegedly assaulting an officer in the city just a day before he attacked this woman. How is it alleged that he attacked an officer? Did he or did he not attack the officer? And if he was already on bail and then committed another act of violence or crime, while on bail, Why is he not behind bars? Why is he released on house arrest? And the day that he was called, where he attacked an officer, his own mother called because his wife and his 3 children felt unsafe with him in the house.
Peter Hans Nungu's family shattered.
He was supposed to be taken to the hospital. That's when we called for help.
Less than 2 days before Nungu is accused of assaulting a tourist on Vancouver's seawall, his mother says his family called police because the 34-year-old was agitated at the Surrey home he shared with his partner and 3 children.
There is an element of intimate partner violence in the file.
Nungu Magdalene says her son experienced a mental health crisis a year ago, which he recovered from. But on April 13th, he was off his medication and needed help.
Mr. Nungu was arrested for 1 count of assaulting a peace officer, 1 count of uttering threats, and 1 count of uttering threats to damage property.
So we have his own mother calling the cops because people don't feel safe around him. Him attacking the police officers. Police saying that there is an element of intimate partner violence. He's clearly choosing not to take his medication, which he needs to be on, according to this. And then what do they decide to do? Hours later, they decide to just release him on bail, and then he attacks this woman. And this is what the chief constable has to say.
Nungu was released from custody the next day, April 14th, on 6 conditions, including that he have no contact with the 2 alleged victims. Hours after his release, Nungu was arrested and charged with assault causing bodily harm after a Toronto woman was injured in a stranger attack in Cole Harbour.
It just felt like he was a predator and I was prey.
Well, they are in hospital right now being reviewed, but we do have some concerns about, not about them getting assessed, but the fact that that person may be back out in community.
Now, wouldn't you say it's kind of crazy that the constable is concerned about releasing this guy back into the community, but then they do that exact thing under house arrest at his mom's place? Like, what is his mom going to do if he decides to become violent again, which clearly he now has a history of that? And they also say that he supposedly has some mental issues, which he's supposed to be medicated, and now he's choosing not to take the medication. How is anybody going to stop this guy? If they're already concerned with the safety of their family, which is why they're calling the cops on him, who's to say he doesn't get out again and do what he did to that woman from Toronto to another individual, if not even worse? This guy needs to be locked up in a either medical facility or a jail cell, and end of story. He was already out on bail and then assaulted somebody. That should just be cut and dry. You're not being allowed out anymore. Like, how much more damage needs to be done to a community or to an individual before this guy actually gets punished? Because right now, all that's happened is he's done a lot of harm to others, and he's just been released on house arrest, which is absolutely bananas. Now, the next story I want to talk about is something that also deals with the government and the crazy policies that they're trying to implement. And you may have seen some of the other creators talk about this. They were covering this pamphlet that's been circulating. I believe Jasmine Lane was the first one that posted on this. And it talks about MAID for children and teens. And this is something that the government was trying to expand into. You could see over here, this MAID for mental illness is another aspect that they wanted to stretch into. It says 1 in 10 people will wait more than 4 months for counseling, and the waiting period for MAID is only 3 months. And this is a big issue. Now, David from Moose and the Loose did find where this pamphlet was from, which is the Evangelical Fellowship of Canada. However, when you look at the brochure as a whole, I don't think it is advocating for these things, because it says here, there is pressure to eliminate MAID-free safe places where patients and doctors are not pressured to end life via MAID. While MAID is widely available, many Canadians struggle to get the care, the support that they need to live. Some Canadians are ending their lives via MAID because they lack needed care and support. And so this brochure is advocating to not have these things. And we actually had 2 individuals who are very important in this space presenting this a few weeks ago, actually, which I don't think got much coverage. But this is them talking about how the government has essentially taken their practice away from them to try to force MAID on individuals.
So in 2021, the provincial government basically took our hospice from us via the Fraser Health Authority. We spent $8 million to build a hospice, 10-bed hospice in a 7,500 square feet palliative care center. We got in on a lease, on a 35-year land lease. When MAID came in, the Fraser Health Authority said to us that we have to start providing MAID, or we can't have any funding. We were getting $1.5 million of our $3 million budget inside of our palliative care program. They said, if you don't provide MAID, you can't have any money. To which we said, that's fine, we don't want your money, we don't need your money. We want to operate here an authentic palliative care program. Apparently that's the wrong answer because they canceled our lease. Almost 25 years left on that property. And they canceled our lease and they evicted us from the property because we refused to kill our patients. Not only that, they evicted our patients, dying people in their beds, from the hospice. They gave them 2 months to get out. Either they were going to leave or they would be carted off somewhere to another hospice in the Fraser Valley, Fraser Authority. It came, they were taken away. We were evicted from our property. 2 weeks later, the Fraser Health Authority walked in and took our hospice and operates it to this day with the same name, the Irene Thomas Hospice that we gave it. Because we would not institute a MAID program inside of our palliative care facility, because everybody has to. It's being compelled across the board.
So after hearing what she said and you go back to that brochure that I just showed you, it's the same thing. There is pressure to eliminate MAID-free safe places where patients and doctors are not pressured to end their life via MAID. That's what she was offering, fully palliative care. She even told the government, I'm not going to take your funding if the strings are attached that I need to provide MAID. Because even down here, it says, all Canadians should have access to palliative care, not pressure to end their lives. And that's what they were trying to offer. The government said, no, we're not happy with that. We're going to take your facility. And the government is just trying to implement more and more overreach. Like it says here, MAID for children and teens. The next gentleman, he talks about how they were supposed to do a review. And instead of doing a review, this is what they proposed.
What we've had in Canada so far federally is committees that have looked to expand the law. Even though the original law, Bill C-14, had in it on the bottom, they added that requirement that the law be fully reviewed. That full review never happened. In fact, when they finally did a review, it wasn't a review, it was to expand the law. And in February of 2023, the federal government came up with a report saying we needed to expand euthanasia to mature minors and by advanced request. So they weren't looking at what was happening in the law, they were looking at expansions of the law. So that review's never happened as was required by the law originally.
Now, I made a few videos on this last year, especially when they were trying to talk about the expansion in the House of Commons with Mark Holland, our health minister, towards expanding it to mature minors and the mentally ill. And we actually did get a pause until 2027 because they said that they needed to look more into this. But 2027 will come up in no time. And there's already individuals who we know who are being subject to MAID that don't actually fall under the proper categories. The most notable one right now is the gentleman who had bed sores in Quebec. And instead of just being properly treated, he ended up taking MAID because of the devastation that the bed sores caused.
Finally, right now in Quebec, there's a coroner's inquest into the death of Norman Munier, and you probably have read about it. But anyway, Norman had bed sores after being in the, he was in the emergency department for several days, not put on a proper mattress. He's a man who had been a quadriplegic, so he needed to be on a proper mattress. He then developed these bed sores. He ended up dying by MAID. Well, how did that ever happen in the first place? MAID becomes then the response to a medical tragedy, because it's a medical tragedy what happened to Norman Munier. He wasn't properly cared for.
Now, we unfortunately know why this is happening, and it's because they look at MAID as the cheaper alternative to proper health care. This gentleman here, clearly had malpractice happen to him, and he chose the MAID route because of the unbearable pain instead of just getting proper treatment that the hospital should have been giving him. And this is why they're advocating for these safe spaces, these MAID-free spaces, because this should be a patient-driven thing, not a doctor-driven thing. But it's getting to the point where now doctors are harassing individuals who are maybe getting close to the end of life or don't see a good future. Death is probably at the doorstep. But instead of just allowing them to have their life run its course, they keep pushing and pushing and pushing for MAID.
We need to have protections written into the law. hospice protection spaces, MAID-free spaces that people can go and understand that they're just going to have health care and they're not going to be harassed, because we have harassment. We have a system, a MAID machine that has gotten completely out of control, and it needs to be brought back. It needs to be clawed back. There needs to be protections for the Canadian people, because we're suffering and our people are frightened to go to hospitals. They're frightened to go to hospices, and that has to end.
We got a phone call from one of our supporters, and this woman called me up, and her husband was in the hospital. He was quite elderly. He was quite ill. He was approaching death. There was no question about any of that. And she was saying, how do we get the doctors to stop asking my husband if he wants MAID? That was the question to me. She said that he's been asked 5 times, and he said no each time, and he continues to be asked. So at what point does it become harassment?
This is why people who have cancer, my friends who have had cancer, have been approached by their doctors. Do you want MAID? Right? It's supposed to be patient-driven. It is not being patient-driven. It's being doctor-driven.
And this whole conversation here is in the context of MAID currently. If it does expand in 2027 to mental illness or mature minors, like it states here, 1 in 10 people will wait more than 4 months for counseling. The waiting period for MAID is only 3 months. It is actually just advocating for you here, saying that this will be the real world. You'll only have to wait 3 months, kill yourself, be cheaper, you won't have to struggle as much. And how many people will take that route versus the normal route when they see things like that? Now, again, that brochure is not advocating it. It's just simply putting out the facts that if it is expanded to mental health, that'll be one of the main factors that people could take MAID, because it will be a lot quicker and it will be cheaper. With all that being said, let me know what you guys think about all this. Sorry for the doom and gloom, but yeah, these are topics that we need to talk about. As always, let me know in the comment section below, and I'll actually end the video with Michelle Ferrari as we started it with her. So I'll see you guys next time.
You can't fix a problem if you don't acknowledge a problem exists.